but we don't just go to war over a long-term threat. And there's no constitutional authority for a president to go to war over a long-term threat without seeking authorization from Congress. Now we have a situation where we really can't predict what happens next. We see Iran lashing out at the region, lashing out at our bases around the region. We may have the Iranian people rise as the president is calling on them to try to topple the regime. Right now we've decapitated it, but the regime still exists. Whether they can do it or whether they get massacred because we don't come in with ground troops is really unknown. And I think just as the president has unleashed chaos at home, he has now unleashed chaos on the world stage, and without a plan really to effectuate whatever aim he might have.
As you know, many of your fellow Democrats in the Senate are urging their colleagues to return to Washington immediately for a vote on this war powers resolution. You're very vocal in your support of that legislation that would rein in the president's authority to launch military action in Iran without congressional approval. And specifically, tell us why.
Well, I introduced, Tim Kaine is the lead, along with Rand Paul, Senator Schumer, and myself, introduced a war powers resolution that calls on the Congress to essentially require the president to come to Congress to continue hostilities, to seek an authorization to use force, as President Bush did in Afghanistan and in Iraq. We haven't seen this kind of massive use of military force by the United States since the initiation of those conflicts. And Congress needs to approve it or needs to say no more. So, yes, I'm urging the Congress to come back into session, take a vote on this, put people on record. If the president wants to continue this war, let him come to Congress and seek an authorization. Let him make the case to the American people. The American people don't want another endless war. The president promised he wouldn't engage in more warfare over regime change. He's broken that promise. Nothing about this is going to improve the quality of life or the cost of living for Americans. If anything, it's going to make it worse. But if he has a case to make, he needs to make it. It doesn't appear that he does, and we need to insist on a vote on this ASAP.
A fellow Democrat, Senator John Fetterman, supports the strikes and the president's authority to order them. Here's what he told our Dana Bash earlier today. Listen to this.
People keep describing that it was a legal war. Now, read the War Powers Act. And now that has not been violated at this point, what happened yesterday.
So how do you respond to that, Senator Schiff? And specifically, if there's a formal vote to authorize this military action, are there enough Republicans to join a lot of Democrats in passing it?
First of all, I'm a good friend of John's, but I don't agree with him here. The Constitution makes it very clear that Congress has the power to declare war. The president essentially declared war in his midnight address the other night, but he does not have that power. And so we're using the remedy that we have, which is the War Powers Act, to try to bring this to a conclusion. In terms of whether we have the votes, I think the vote for it will be bipartisan. In light of what John said, the vote against it will be also, some element will be bipartisan. Whether we'll have enough votes, I don't know. It may depend on what happens between now and the time that votes takes place, and how long this conflict continues. If it continues, we will bring up undoubtedly successive war powers resolutions. But I would hope that we could insist that if a president of the United States wants to declare war, they need to come to Congress. This president has shown all too much willingness, whether it's in Venezuela or Nigeria or Iran or elsewhere, to simply let loose the dogs of war, and we need to rein that in.
Senator Adam Schiff, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Wolf.
Joining me now is Yasmin Farouk. She's the Gulf and Arabian Peninsula Project Director at the International Crisis Group. Having you on this morning, incredibly important to us. Your analysis will be, hugely important for our viewers as we continue to look at the scope of what is going on now around this region. Let's start with what we have seen out of Kuwait this morning, and the MOD there confirming the downing of a number of U.S. aircraft. They say all crew are safe. These are dramatic pictures as we see the pilot and perhaps it is the crewman, at least from one of those planes, parachuting to safety. We've also seen a hit, be that a hit or debris affecting an oil refinery there in Kuwait. What do you make of these events and the wider sort of regional story here at this point?
Good morning, Becky. Thanks for having me. I think we're going to see more and more of this. This war is escalating because it was expected. The Iranian regime is fighting for its survival, but instead of targeting Israel and the U.S., it is also targeting its neighbors in the Gulf country that it sees as, at worst, not doing enough to prevent this war, despite months and months, Becky, of the Gulf countries leading on mediation between the U.S. and Iran. Iran is targeting also, as I'm sure you have seen this morning, there was a fire in the Ras Tanura terminal in Saudi Arabia as well. And President Trump himself said, at the beginning of this war that there will be and there might be U.S. casualties. And I think this is a major escalation for both the U.S., Iran, and the Gulf. We have seen yesterday as well European countries coming on board in what they are very precisely dubbing a defensive role in this war to defend their allies and partners in the Gulf. We have seen an increase in tone from Saudi Arabia and the UAE saying that they will not stand by while Iran escalates its attacks against their civilian infrastructure, and today it's the energy infrastructure. So this war is escalating and is drawing in more and more parties, Becky.
I want to just underscore the remarkable number of incoming attacks that the region is taking. We've just been talking about Kuwait. We are hearing reports of events in Saudi today. More on that as we get it. With the UAE so far sustaining the most incoming, the Ministry of Defence here in its latest estimate, and this is some hours ago, recording 165 ballistic missiles, 2 cruise missiles, 541 Iranian drones have been fired on the UAE since Saturday. The UAE, of course, has invested heavily in advanced and expensive defensive systems, and they are mostly holding up. The question will be how much longer can this sort of this sort of defense system infrastructure be sustained at this point?
Absolutely, Becky. It's not just a military effort. It's also an economic effort that Iran and an economic cost that Iran is betting on, not just when it comes to the defense system, but as I said, the civilian infrastructure, because crisis management is not just about military. It's also about communication. It's about the reputational cost. And, Becky, the UAE was one of the countries in the Gulf that hasn't put Iran's missiles program on, let's say, the list of requirements for what it would see as a comprehensive deal. And now I think we are seeing why. The expansion of these missiles and drone attacks, again, not only on civilian, on U.S. targets first, and then military infrastructure, and now energy infrastructure, is going and is backfiring against Iran. And as I said, the operations that the E3 have declared that they're going to involve in yesterday through a statement include destroying those launchers of drones and missiles, and the U.S. and the U.K. has also declared yesterday that this threat cannot be ended without attacking it at the source. And so the Gulf countries, so far, I think the decision has been taken, as we saw, that they are not going to take more of this because they see this as escalation, so as escalating more and more. So I expect to see reactions.
And Pope Leo says he is following events following the US-Israeli strikes on Iran with, and I quote him here, with deep concern. Speaking as part of his weekly address in Vatican City, the Pope called on leaders to assume moral responsibility to prevent further conflict. Have a listen.
I am following with deep concern what is happening in the Middle East and Iran at this dramatic time. Stability and peace cannot be built through mutual threats or with weapons that sow destruction, pain, and death. They can only be achieved through reasonable, genuine, and responsible dialogue. Faced with the possibility of a tragedy of enormous proportions, I address a heartfelt appeal to the parties involved to assume moral responsibility to stop the spiral of violence before it becomes an irreparable abyss.
Thousands of people in Yemen, Iraq, Seoul, Toronto, protesting these strikes. Many could be seen waving Iranian flags and carrying pictures of Tehran's late supreme leader. In Pakistan, violence erupted on Sunday at a US consulate in Karachi. 10 people were killed after protesters breached the facility's barriers. Others are supporting the war, particularly much of the far-flung Iranian diaspora in Istanbul. Iranian exiles handed out sweets and flowers, whilst joyfully chanting against Iran's Islamic regime. And in London, thousands marched through the streets waving American and Israeli flags. In Rome, Iranian demonstrators came together waving pre-revolution Iranian flags, dancing on effigies of the now deceased supreme leader. What is the very latest as we understand it?
Right. We know what the Ministry of Defense has announced, that several U.S. warplanes have crashed. We don't have a cause for that, and we assume that this must be connected to videos that CNN has been able to geolocate and verify, showing an F-15 fighter jet in a tailspin, plunging from the sky, and a separate video also geolocated to Kuwait showing a pilot descending in a parachute. We don't know if that's from one incident or more than one, but this is geolocated to be close to a U.S. airbase in Kuwait. The Kuwaiti government is saying that all of the air crews from these multiple crashes, and again, we don't know the causes, are accounted for. They've been rescued and are being treated in a hospital, and their condition is stable. CNN has reached out to U.S. Central Command to try to learn more about just what could have taken place there.
We are hearing explosions ring out this morning in cities across the Gulf. Iran's retaliation for ongoing US and Israeli strikes. Earlier, our team heard a huge blast here in Abu Dhabi, in Dubai. A CNN team heard 2 back-to-back blasts and jets flying overhead. And CNN senior reporter Bijan Hosseini shows us what appears to be missiles being intercepted over Doha. Have a look.
It is day 3 here in Doha's West Bay of Iran's retaliation of strikes. It's 8:05 in the morning local time, and we just heard what was maybe 6 or 7 loud explosions happening all around us. You can see one right over there, there's one over there, kind of happening around the city center. These are air defense missile systems. The government uses Patriot missile defense systems that they bought from the U.S., so that would have been these targeting those Iranian strikes.
AI company Anthropic, they just announced that they, quote, cannot in good conscience, unquote, comply with Secretary Pete Hegseth and the Pentagon's deadline and demand that they lift all the safeguards for the Pentagon to use their product by tomorrow. This means that they are at risk of losing their $200 million contract and being labeled an unreliable provider. Anthropic, in a statement, says the use of AI in mass domestic surveillance and also fully autonomous weapons are, quote, outside the bounds of what today's technology can safely and reliably do. Anthropic says it remains ready to support the national security of the United States.
This is CNN. More people get their news from CNN than any other news source.
So we're 3 days in. Can you give us an assessment of where the war stands from Israel's perspective?
Yeah, so I think where we